being kind to people you agree with is the easiest thing in the world. The only thing that matters is you can be kind to a bigot. And when I say that, I don't mean that everyone has the same capacity to be kind to a bigot, because some people are the direct victims of that bigotry, and sure, they're going to scream at them and punch them. But to the extent that we can make the world a better place, each one of us, in fact, let this not be advice, this is just for me. I feel like my job is to keep my arms as wide as I can bear. If I can bear to be kind to that person I frickin' disagree with on everything, then that's the bit I can do. That's the bit I want to increase my capacity to do by not being stressed all the time. If I can, in my life, in this podcast, and when someone hears this and shouts at me on the internet or whatever, if I can try to be kind to people who disagree with me, I feel like that's the mission.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is, well, how can I describe him? He does a bit of everything. He's a composer, comedian, writer, actor, screenwriter, and now he's got a book. Tim Minchin, in fact, likes to be, I think the word he's used is unpigeonholeable. So he doesn't really want to be described as anything in particular, but he also says, the thing I am best in the world at is being a science-obsessed, uber-rhymey, polemicist, pianist, singer, satirist, wank. With apologies for the language, it's his, not mine. Welcome.
Thanks.
Now,
do you not use that? You've never used the word? I feel like you're a man who's used the word before.
I may use it a lot, and we do use it in this podcast.
Okay, great.
But generally, we try not to swear on the podcast.
Okay, good. That's a really good note for me.
But now we already have, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, okay.
We have to put the explicit language warning on the
now that you've quoted me saying the W word.
This book, You Don't Have to Have a Dream, Advice for the Incrementally Ambitious, came from 3 speeches you did to students.
Yes,
Just explain that.
Well, I've been very lucky in my life, and I've done some cool things. And when you get to do some cool things, one of the cool things that happens is a university might offer you a pretend degree, or at least an honorary doctorate. And I really like honorary doctorates because you don't have to work for them. And the quid pro quo is they'll give you an honorary doctorate, and you'll go put on a gown and a hat and do a speech. And the first one I did was at University of West Australia, where I did my Bachelor of Arts in the 90s. And that speech went kind of ridiculous.
Insanely viral.
Yeah. And all in various places all over the internet. It got shared a lot. And then, of course, the people are motivated to give me more honorary degrees in the hope that I give them more virality. So I did another one for Mount View, the London Theatre School, in 2015 or something, and then a third one at my other alma mater in Perth, the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts. And over the years, various publishers have said, would you like to do a book of the viral speech? And I've sort of been that felt a bit cynical to me to just roll out a book of something. But then recently, a publisher said, why don't we collect them all together? And I said, sure, but I'll write some essays so it's not just rolling out pre-existing material. And now it's really gorgeous. It's a beautiful,
come together very nicely.
Yeah, a really amazing illustrator and designer, and
it's quite unusual for people to be unabashed about just giving life lessons and advice.
Yeah, would you say it's quite pretentious or pompous to just offer advice?
No, but a lot of people worry about that, and one of your great refrains is to be a critical thinker and to interrogate your own beliefs.
Yeah.
So I wondered how worried you were about putting them down in black and white and saying, yeah, that's what I believe.
I was very worried by that. And when I got asked to do the first one, I was 38, which is not very old. But I was flying home to make this speech. I've spent a lot of time talking about ideas, because even when comedy was my main focus, my comedy was I always say it was sort of sex, death, and God. You know, I wasn't doing, isn't it funny how when you go to buy an ice cream, you know, I'm not an anecdotalist, I'm a ideas man. And so I thought, I'm still only 38. What have I got to say? And I realized that I was basically twice as old as the people I was talking to. And that's not nothing. You know, if you've had 18 years more experience than an 18-year-old, I thought I'm the right person to just say what I've learned. And the other thing I'm really interested in is taking big ideas and making them light. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to try and make a wicked commencement speech about what I think life is about, and I'm going to make it light and funny. I'm going to go really hard at like, you're going to die soon, have a fun life. And I hope I took the pomposity off it with humor, which is literally how I've made a living. Yeah.
I mean, I was slightly ashamed when I saw what you'd done.
That's my aim, is to shame people.
So I've given 3 honorary degree speeches in my time as well. And I fear that I've given the opposite advice, because you begin with, you don't have to have a dream.
Yeah.
And I think I'm one of those people who has told students, dream big if you want to.
Yeah.
You can be anything you want. So what do you mean by you don't have to have a dream?
Well, I think in my career and in these speeches, I have a tendency to interrogate dominant narratives, right? Whether the dominant narrative is religion or a political dominant narrative. I don't think I'm a contrarian, but I really question everything. It's just my brain. It's probably mostly a wiring thing. I just go, is that it? And I've done that all my life, and it's worked out well for me in my career. And so when I say you don't have to have a dream, really it's a salve for people who feel the pressure of the memification of the idea that life is only meaningful if you have a big old, like, I'm going to have my name in lights, I'm going to be an astronaut, my mummy says I'm a miracle, I'm going to be the president of the United States. And I think there's toxicity in that if it's not mitigated by, okay, great, I'm glad that you've got something big, but a lot of people don't. And if we're honest, a lot of people won't have the capacity to be a quarterback for the whatever, or an astronaut. They won't have whatever you need, the physical strength or the wiring in their brain. And I think most people don't have
Did you have a dream?
Well, in my speech, I say I didn't. And I suppose I did, but it was not how I approached life, because I just didn't believe any of it. I come from Perth. I'm largely self-taught. At no point ever did I think I'm going to have a musical on the West End. It never crossed my mind. I thought maybe one day I'll be able to go to Melbourne and they might let me write some music for theatre in an independent theatre. Like, my dreams were capped. The real advice is, don't worry about where you're going to end up too much, because if you think about the far goal, how do you go about getting your name in lights or being an astronaut? What you need to do is be really dedicated to the project you do have an opportunity to do. So for me, when I got asked to write songs for a youth theatre company version of Love's Labour's Lost when I was 18, my attitude was, I'm going to make this just awesome. I'm going to show them. I'm going to blow them away. And I never thought, and then I will get another gig. I had my eyes on nothing but opening night of Love's Labour's Lost in 1993. Similarly, 15 years later, I guess, when I wrote Matilda, I had nothing in my mind but opening night at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford.
Yeah, so how did Matilda come about? Because, you were huge as a performing musical
I was
comedian.
on my way, yeah.
And you would think at that, a normal performer at that stage would be then plotting out, okay, well, you do X number of DVDs, you make loads of money, you go on big tours, you've got a TV show, you do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
You take this total sort of dogleg, really. I mean, I know it's not in terms of who you are, because you're a musician, but it's such a different thing to do.
Yeah, well, it was actually, I wrote Matilda at the beginning of 2009. If I had gone, oh my God, I'm doing big theatre, then I'm going to do arenas, and then I'm going to have my own panel show, and then I'm going to be Jimmy Carr, whatever. My life has been defined by making sure I don't notice the interesting side paths. That's the reason I've ended up with a career that I would not swap for anyone's. No big star. There's no career I'd rather than this one, where I get to go, I'm going to do an album now, I'm going to write a TV show now, I'm going to do a musical. And that's because I haven't had a big old goal.
Because one of your other life lessons in another speech is that you've got to be really good. You've got to work really hard at what it is you want to do to be really good at it.
Well, I think it's a bit flippant to, that speech was aimed mostly at musicians. It was at the university where I did a 2-year music course, which I did because I thought I had to learn to read music, and I failed to learn to read music, but I did learn some really cool stuff. But I guess the point is, I feel like, I'm going to say kids these days, I feel like because of how kids consume stuff, here's a kid in India playing guitar like a freaking virtuoso, and they sort of get this impression that you kind of just are good at things, that you don't have to get good at things. So I guess what I'm saying is understand that it's thousands of hours if you want to.
Yeah.
You don't get, my kids, they're like, it's hard. And I'm like, yeah, it's really hard. It's going to take ages.
Yeah.
It's going to take ages.
But it does, doesn't it? I mean, I did this in a sort of spectacularly bad parenting move with my teenager who used to spend hours on video games and social media and all the rest of it. And I tried to inspire him. And he was sort of a bad guitarist in a bad band. And and it kind of frustrated me for years that he just wasn't better. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to inspire him by getting him a very, very nice guitar. Yeah. And normally that would be very, very bad parenting and it wouldn't work. Very lucky for me it did, because his attitude towards having a really nice guitar was, I'm not good enough to play this guitar.
I better get
So I'm going to practice. Well, not practice. He just played it for an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. And he still does. And he's become really good.
I think
because if you do anything that long every day, you're going to become really good at it.
The opposite thing is if you buy someone a crappy instrument, the other way of expressing that, if you buy someone a bad tool, they're not going to be inspired to rise to that tool. And I definitely, it's a very privileged thing to be able to do. But when people say, oh, my kid's quite good at piano, what should I get him? I'm like, get him the best piano you can. At the absolute worst, in 5 years, you'll have to sell it. But without a doubt, I didn't get my first physical piano till I was 30.
How, really?
Well,
so how did you play?
Oh, there was, I grew up with a really old, super bad action, 100-year-old pianola, right? Pedal piano. And that was what I taught myself on. It was just horrible, but beautiful. I can still hear it. And then when I was 21, my parents bought me an electric keyboard, and that's what I did gigs on. Prior to that, I had like a Casio on an ironing board when I was doing gigs in my late teens. And then I got a Yamaha weighted keyboard. But then I moved to Melbourne, and Sarah had her childhood upright, which came with us. But I bought my first upright piano after I moved to England when I was 30. And then I bought several pianos since. Yeah. But I didn't get good until suddenly people were watching me. And I went, oh my God, people are watching me after 2005, after Edinburgh. And I went, I'm going to play only grand pianos, and I'm going to double down here. So when you watch my orchestra show and there's songs like Lullaby and Thank You God, 3 years before then, I could not do that. I just went, I want to do a song that sounds like a virtuosic classical thing. I'm just going to teach myself how to do it. So I was driven up by audience and instruments. And I don't know how to give that advice to people, but having something to aspire to, I guess, is a great driver.
You sort of ran away from fame, didn't you? You disappeared off to America.
Yes, once I got to arenas, I kind of stopped.
Why? What is it about fame that you are sort of
I think I say I ran away from fame because it makes me look like a real grounded, good person. And there was a little bit of that. There was definitely a little bit of like, I'm wandering around Crouch End and with my kids, and you hear, my name has all these eyes in it, so you hear, and you can tell, and the kids know, and people are looking at you, and I thought that's not good. But I ran, yes, away from fame, but I ran towards unpigeonholeability, to come back to it. I went, oh wow, I've written Matilda, and that seems to be on the West End, and people are taking me seriously. Now I've got an opportunity to direct and write a $90 million animated musical in Hollywood. I see a broader career for me than comedy. And so although I did decide I wanted to protect my kids from fame, it was also, I was more ambitious than that.
Since success found you, or you found success, have you had failure?
Oh yeah. I mean, failure doesn't feel very useful to me. I've had and it's all relative. I had a terrible year in, I think it was 2017, where I had moved my family to LA to make this film. It's an animated Outback musical. And I was doing lots of different things, but the majority of that 3.5 years was dedicated to this film. And then DreamWorks, where we were making it, got bought, and the film got shut down after those years of work. It was like 3/4 finished. And then very soon after that, Groundhog Day, the musical, which had gone to Broadway, closed it did a few months, but way before it made its money back.
It wasn't Matilda, basically.
Yes, exactly. It was not a hit on Broadway. And then I had a role playing Friar Tuck in this massive big budget Hollywood film, and that was like the famous critical flop of that year. And so having spent 10 years where everything I touched seemed to turn to gold, like my comedy career in Matilda, and even I voiced an animated short film in Australia and it won the Oscar, and it's just like sailing. And to be fair on me, working so hard. Once the door opened, I put my foot to the pedal, and I probably still haven't taken it off and need to learn to. But so I felt like I was a big-hearted, hard-working, art-loving, good energy, and that's why I was succeeding. And then that year, the universe taught me a lesson, which was that you can't Pollyanna your way through America. You will have things that don't soar. Doesn't matter how big your heart is and how hard you work.
And how did you cope with it?
You'd have to ask my wife. Pretty poorly, I think. Like, not outward behaviour. It knocked me sideways. I found it very hard to deal with the opportunity cost. Because I love what I do, the idea that I could have been writing another musical, I could have been working on an album or my tour, the stuff I sacrificed to do that film, I felt the loss of that as much as I felt the loss of the film itself. And of course, humans hate thwarted expectations. So I was a year away from, Oscar nomination for Best Animated Film, as far as I was concerned. Like, why the hell not? And suddenly I had absolutely nothing to show for it.
And is it true that the higher you rise, the harder you fall?
I think that could be the case, but it's just not how I think about the world. Although I found I was very down about, especially Groundhog Day, which I thought and still believe to be a better piece of theatre than Matilda in many, many ways, in the ways that I care about in terms of, musical complexity and thematic depth and theatre making in general. I was pretty down about that. I was angry about the film because I've never had a boss. I don't take well to hierarchical power flexes. Like, I will listen to a note from a studio executive or a note from a storyboard artist or a note from a chorus member of one of my musicals or a note from the sound guy, monitor, engineer equally. I'll listen to the note, and if I think it's a good note, I'll take it, and if I don't, I won't. But in America, if an executive says change that, they just expect you to change it. And so I was already in a bit of a grapple with the studio system. And when they shut it, basically my reaction was, how dare you take my work off me? It was quite righteous. But I have a metacognition overdrive. So every feeling I have a thought about that feeling and a thought about the feeling, which is tedious and annoying. But I never just feel sad. I feel sad and then I punish myself for being so righteous as to feel sad, and then I reframe it. And we're all doing that, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, you say your comedy show was quite complex. It was about ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was also about your progressive values and your politics to some degree. And when you're not doing that so obviously anymore, what's the outlet for what you want to say, what you want to get across, what you believe?
I don't think my comedy was political or scientifically ranty or whatever it was, very godless, obviously. Comedy was not my vehicle for my ideas. My ideas was the stuff that was lying around when suddenly I had an audience. It's like me finding an audience for my capacity to play funny songs with lots of words, intercepted with a post 9/11 sort of era where new atheism was rising up, and I was really interested in data and science. I studied a bit of philosophy and psychology at uni, but later in my 20s, I kind of ate that stuff up. I was just reading all this stuff about psychology and philosophy, why we believe what we believe, and how science works and all this. And it just was what was lying around, I think. So comedy wasn't a delivery method of my worldview. Like Upright, my TV show, those ideas about how we deal with pain and family and caring for one another and how we overcome grief, and those ideas are just as important to me. In fact, as you get older, you kind of change what matters most. I haven't had any sort of road to Damascus, change in my basic worldview. And as you can see from the book, I'm still a materialist, determinist, optimist, pragmatist, or whatever the hell.
Atheist,
yeah. Definitely. But
that hasn't changed, has it? I mean,
well, it would be very strange, wouldn't it?
Well, no, not that strange. I mean, don't people quite often change their view on spirituality as they get older?
Not often in that direction without trauma. I think mostly religions are cultural, you inherit it, and trauma can make you lose it. I mean, certainly because of the material I did, I have contact still often with people who stop me in the street and say, I was in a bad situation with a church, or I was brought up in Iran, and when I came to Australia, your material opened my mind to... I mean, this sounds very self-serving, but a lot of people get de-radicalized, or de-radicalized is too much. They lose their faith and look for people who are talking about that to give them some meaning outside of it, right? I never had faith, and I don't think many people find faith unless they've got a massive hole that they're looking to fill. And so I don't think the basis of my worldview has changed at all, really. I'm utterly convinced that we live in a deterministic universe that has just emerged, and that humans are just meat robots. How I talk about it has changed for a couple of reasons. For one reason, really, which is my position has changed. When I started writing those songs, I was like a young man with a lot of ideas, and I was like trying to find an audience, and I was playing in tiny cabaret rooms, and I hate this phrase, but I was sort of punching up at the structures that retain power and don't look after kids and whatever. Now I'm 49, and people know who I am, and the world is full of polemicists. Everyone's a polemicist now. Everyone thinks the way to express themselves is to say the sort of biggest mic drop thing in the smallest amount of words. And I'm like, I'm out. Polemic is no longer my form. I'm going to try and tell generous stories about humans and how we all have humanity in common,
Yeah. I mean, you've dropped off social media essentially, partly because of that, I guess.
Yeah, I found it very stressful. And I've been wondering recently if it's because when I talk to people about why I couldn't be on social media, sometimes I see them going, like, looking a bit confused. And I've realized that not everyone finds it as distressing as me. And that there could be two reasons. One, I think I followed a lot of interesting people who had political views. And so my algorithm's just feeding me the edgiest stuff, because I use social media to expand my social group. Basically, I was like, I've never heard from... long before Black Lives Matter, before the Floyd hot point, I was following those people. When I moved to America, I'm like, oh, they're interesting, And so I flooded myself with distress. But the other thing is, I think I take it on. I think I find it really distressing when people are distressed. I think some people are numb to it. Anyway, so...
And that is what social media does. I mean, it floods you with the world's pain.
Well, I think mine did. Does yours? Do you feel like you're being fed pain?
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, I use Twitter mostly for news, or X.
Yes.
And Instagram was supposed to be a sort of a happy place.
I know, and that's what
I sort of did my Strictly Come Dancing stuff and all that kind of stuff. But actually, that's been taken over by people sending me images from Israel and Gaza.
And they think they're doing good things. They think they're making sure no one's looking away. Which is
well,
true.
I keep wanting to reply and say, I know, I do the news. You don't need to send me those images because I've seen them before you did. But
I have so many things to say about that. Like, there is an assumption from people who are very, very passionate that because Krishnan's not posting these images, he must not care, because the only way I know how to care is to post the images. And that's a slightly narcissistic thing, because you have no idea how much you care or I care. I think it is paralyzing. I think I noticed I was doing less good because I was so distressed by the world that counterintuitively you think, I'm not burying my head in the sand. Look at me observing and acknowledging the distress of the world. That is ethical only if you put it into action, only if it increases the amount you donate or increases the amount of pressure you put on your local MP, or if it makes you buy a plane ticket and get over there and, grab a Medicaid kit. And, if it makes you do nothing but feel distressed, then you have to ask yourself the question, who else is suffering for my distress? And if you're a father, it might be your kids. I found myself not okay in myself a lot because of how distressed I was. And so I just needed, it's not that I've buried my head in the sand, I just need to have agency in what I'm seeing and what I'm reading, and not let the algorithm tell me what I should be seeing and reading. And the only way I could do that is get off it all.
And does getting off it all also mean television news and newspapers?
Well, I don't really watch telly, except I dial up a movie or whatever. I have 3 apps on my phone, an Australian newspaper, the BBC and the New York Times, and I'd go to them every second day for 20 minutes. And
is that enough for you really to be informed? To know what's going on?
Well,
and to form opinions on it?
No, because the world doesn't need my opinion.
But you might. I mean, you're a thinking being. I mean,
yeah, but there's a cost benefit, right? So 2 things I'd say. This is a really interesting conversation to me. So I apologize if I sound like I'm preaching. I'm sort of posing the question. Firstly, is what's coming through your news apps or your Twitter feed the news, or is it the news enhanced by the only thing that motivates it, which is clickbait, which is this headline I'm clicking on because it's very distressing, or this headline I'm clicking on because I already agree with it. So it's this extremification. Since we've got phones in our pockets, basically, it is forcing us to have stronger and stronger views about things, and it is not informing us in a balanced way, because it takes a very, very, very long time to get your head around the geopolitics of the Middle East. And most people who have strong feelings haven't put that time in, including myself. And I have strong feelings. So you're not getting the news, you're getting the algorithm's idea of what people want to feed off. So while you're reading news about issue A, you're not hearing all the other issues. Yeah. You're just not getting the news. So you're not informed. You're just informed about the stuff that everyone's agitated by. And so if you can curate your input and try and make it as wide as possible and get off the apps which really are not news, they're people's hot takes on the news, I think you can be as informed. And the only other thing I'd say is it's not a priori ethical to be informed. It's only ethical if being informed makes you better in the world. And I've made this point and got in real trouble because people are like, you're a privileged white guy burying your head in the sand. And I feel like I just need to say it again.
Is it a moral question, though? I mean, is it an ethical question, being informed?
So. I think everything's an ethical question. For example, if you're more informed, but it makes you a worse father, a worse neighbor, and paralyzed so you don't know who to give to charity, and you're distressed all the time and you shout at a cab driver, and being less informed makes you a better father, a better neighbor, more soup kitchen-y, more charitable, and you don't shout at the cab driver, then yes, it's a moral question.
But you're a citizen in a democratic country with agency and
yes,
a vote
you'd want to,
that you are legally.
You want to get your vote right, yeah.
And you're an intelligent person,
yeah.
So you surely have an obligation to inform yourself, to be a good citizen.
Mm-hmm. You need.
I'm not saying you can't be just by reading 3 apps, but I mean,
being a good citizen. It's what I just pitched to you is maybe you're not being as good a citizen. It's just about agency over what information you're taking in.
Yeah.
I would like to be informed enough to vote in my electorate. And that's very hard because you're not more informed by reading more news.
Certainly not on social media. I mean, old-fashioned media, the kind of programs that I do and all the rest, but they are curated by people.
And I'm much more likely to spend an hour listening to you than an hour flicking through a thing. That is what I'm talking about. I look for long reads and analysis after the pressure's gone down, and obviously you cannot miss the big news stories that Oasis has gone on sale, like the stuff that really matters, the stuff that actually occupies people's thoughts. No, but we live in this world. You cannot miss the big moments. You can unaddict yourself to a constant 24-hour news input.
And do you feel it's your duty to try and keep your kids off these as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Phones.
It's very, very, very hard. They don't use it like we do. Our generation got sideswiped, and we thought it was going to, Arab Spring 2012. We're like, here we go, democracy in action. Now everyone has a voice. This is going to be amazing. And literally 3 years later, it was like, oh, we're all shouting at each other and getting more divided. I mean, this stat that boys are going right and girls are going left in America and Britain, and it will be Australia too. I mean, that is catastrophic. I find that catastrophic.
And do you understand why that's happening?
Yep.
And why do you think boys go right? Because of social media? I mean, my boy and his friends get bombarded with this.
That's why,
stuff.
because everyone's on all the time, apparently getting informed, but actually just being fed what agitates them or what they already agree with, right? So you click on stuff that outrages you. How dare Trump say that? Or stuff you love. Oh my God, did you see Oprah speak at the DNC? That's what you're getting, mostly, unless you curate your input really carefully by not being on social media. If you're a straight white bloke in contemporary America, you are not seeing a lot of positive messages about how great straight white blokes are. There's not a lot of stuff for you about pride that makes you feel good. There's a lot of stuff about how terrible you are, and they're just going to run into the arms of someone who lets them have pride. Like every population on Earth forever, you take pride away from people, it's bad. We know that, right? We know that by how the British colony treated, Indigenous peoples. They literally, to speak for my country, and I find it impossible to speak about without getting emotional, but you took away dignity. That's what you did. That's what we will never recover from, is the removal of dignity. And I'm not drawing equivalents between Aboriginal Australia and straight white guys, but the proof's in the pudding, right? It doesn't matter whether you agree with me or not about how the messaging we're sending these boys. Watch them drift towards Andrew Tate. Maybe it's just because they're, but it's happening. And the question is, what do we do, right? And so I know this isn't the most important issue in the world, but it's just something I've been thinking about this week. Because we know what happens when people have extreme different ideals, and then you add to that gender difference, like mad.
I mean, the two life lessons that you're that's in this book, that are obvious. There's sort of the be kind thing, and be creative. Now, be kind has kind of become a bit of a mocked meme, hasn't it?
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Where to say be kind is just kind of laughed at, a lot of the time. But you mean it, don't you?
So, because it's this sort of podcast and I really like talking to you and there's time to unpack it, firstly, the biggest life lesson in my big speech is be hard on your own opinions. Take them outside and hit them with a cricket bat, And that's my worldview, that it's very, very hard. I say in one of the introductions, you have to have psychological, neurological, epistemic, and cultural humility. You are riddled with bias, and every decision you make about what you feel is because of confirmation bias and because you're firming up the narrative of your centrality in the world, and you're keeping yourself a hero and you're keeping yourself righteous. And the way you keep yourself a righteous hero is you make sure other people are baddies because they think differently from you. And we all do it all the time, including old mate Big Head sitting here. But I'm a critical thinking nerd, and critical thinking is all about checking your biases, right? So that's more important. The be kind thing is a hilarious meme. And the reason it's mockable and should be mocked is because people mean be kind to the people I agree with. They make exceptions all the time. Well, obviously I can't be kind to a fascist Well, what's a fascist? Oh, let's dig under the surface. What you mean is just anyone who disagrees with you. Kindness is only, and I say this in one of my introductions too about my boy going on camp and like how you act when your tent is flooded and someone's being an asshole to you on camp. That's where it matters. That's where being kind matters. Being kind to people you agree with is the easiest thing in the world. The only thing that matters is you can be kind to a bigot. And when I say that, I don't mean that everyone has the same capacity to be kind to a bigot, because some people are the direct victims of that bigotry, and sure, they're going to scream at them and punch them. But to the extent that we can make the world a better place, each one of us, in fact, let this not be advice. This is just for me. I feel like my job is to keep my arms as wide as I can bear. If I can bear to be kind to that person I frickin' disagree with on everything, then that's the bit I can do. That's the bit I want to increase my capacity to do by not being stressed all the time. If I can, in my life, in this podcast, and when someone hears this and shouts at me on the internet or whatever, if I can try to be kind to people who disagree with me, I feel like that's the mission.
Where does that leave you with? And I don't want to sort of flush you out on this if you don't want to talk about it.
No,
but
of course.
You said on Israel, you've got very strong feelings on it.
Yeah, I don't have strong political feelings.
What your feelings on it are now, or are you?
No,
or are you basically afraid to do that?
Absolutely not. When we respond to Israel and Gaza, it'd be really good if we could just spend as much time considering what it might feel to be one of our Jewish friends or what it might feel to be one of our Muslim friends before we put on our Israel Lies poster or our, Hamas poster or whatever. Like, let's consider it's just the same thing I've been saying since the fence in 2008. I've been writing about non-binary thinking since long before the internet. So my feelings about Israel and Gaza is like, the world does not need Tim Minchin's take on Israel and Gaza. The only thing I would ever say is let's look after each other and keep our arms as wide as possible. Let's not let this horrible thing happening make us horrible. And, so after I said that thing on stage, it ended up in the papers and I got absolutely slammed by people calling me a racist. Like, it's just the most absurd reaction, and that was what actually got me off the internet. It would be crazy for me to try and advertise my opinion on that issue. Why does the world need that? And why do people demand that? Do you sort of have a position on Israel and Palestine that you publish?
Well, I'm not allowed to have a position on anything because, if I reveal, obviously I have thoughts, personal thoughts, but if I revealed any of it, then
you get busted.
Not be able to do my
you're
job.
A journalist, yeah.
But yeah, we live in a world in which people feel able and almost obliged to sort of say what they think about everything.
Yeah, well, in Australia,
argue about it.
In Australia, there's lists. There's online lists, including Zionists in music is a list. And it's basically a list of Jewish people to boycott. It's pretty amazing in 2024, isn't it? I'm on those lists not because I've said anything pro-Israel or anything pro-Palestine, but because I haven't said what they think I should say.
They want you to come out and say it, but you won't.
They demand that I hold their opinion and that I voice it. They don't know whether I do or not. They don't know the extent to which I see this as geopolitical or religious or about extremism or expansionism or colonialism I've read so much about it, and you will never get me trying to put it into 20 seconds or a tweet. I think it's utterly irresponsible. And yet there's lists that I'm on because I refuse to actually utter their shibboleths. It's not actually about opinion, it's shibboleths. It's like, if you say this word, we know you're on our team. And they demand that I say their words.
So if you were writing these speeches today, I suppose you would have said, get off social media.
Yeah, well, I in one of my introductions, I do acknowledge that it would be different now. I feel very anxious about social media and its extremification, black and white thinking, promoting algorithms. you can get that by when you talk to me about where I come from in terms of my worldview and checking biases and stuff. What's weird, though, is I have to also check my anxiety about it, because am I just anxious about it because that's what my algorithm's feeding me? Maybe I'm just getting caught up in some other algorithm that's feeding me stuff about how bad the internet is, which would be ironic, right?
Do you think you laugh enough? You talk a lot about your worries.
No, and that's the other reason. I really like having these discussions, but I'm trying to find lightness in my life. It's very, very important for my children that their dad and mum aren't carrying weight all the time. It can't help the world. So I'm having got off. I'm feeling better. It's good. I feel disconnected from my friends, but I feel better in my life. The most important lesson in my viral speech is define yourself by what you love. And I was 38 when I wrote that, and I sort of was being a clever ass, but I think that I need to listen to 38-year-old me. It says define yourself by what you love, because people tend to define themselves in opposition to stuff. And the conclusion of that lesson is be pro stuff, not just anti stuff. And that's my mission for my next decade, is to find a way to still care about the world, but to promote positive narratives, not just dissect and, kind of pull down things I disagree with,
If you got to change the world with a magic wand, how would you change it?
I'd make myself 6'4", cheekbones for days. I don't know, man. I mean, how I would make everyone kind to each other even when they disagree. I'd make war not a thing. I'd fix the climate and take away nuclear technology. Do you know, I'd probably go back. I'd go tell sapiens not to farm. So I think as soon as we started farming, we were just on this track.
We should have just stayed as hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But the internet has done a lot of wonderful things for a lot of people. I think, it'd be nice to be able to go back before social media and see it coming and be a bit more conscious. We should always be really conscious of just because we can. Humans just do because they can. And that's like maybe our worst, the thing that puts us at risk the most is we don't have enough philosophers in, arms companies.
We don't say, should we?
Yeah, exactly. We say, can we, not should we. We're very bad at long-term thinking. We're very bad at looking past a single generation and immediate need. I don't think we're going to fix that anytime soon, though. What would you do if you had a wand, apart from join me in 6'4"? You got good cheekbones already.
Yeah, no, 6'4" would be nice. I don't know. I've listened to too many different versions of that answer to be able to formulate my own just yet. But
yeah, and there isn't one, right? I mean, humanity, and certainly in my industry, art and storytelling and building narratives, the messiness is us. You can't clean up humans. That's what Upright's about. That the scars and the beatings we take and the errors we make and the pain we get and the pain we cause, that is us. The piano is the metaphor in Upright, but he says, look, it's all hacked up and battered and it's a little bit out of tune, but it's got its own tone, and if you play it, you'll find it's beautiful. And he's talking about it himself, I suppose, or it's like we are our damage as individuals and as a species. So you can't fix it. You just got to be part of telling a good story, telling a loving story. And it's easier to say that when you're privileged and rich and white, and it's easy for me to say, but I feel very compelled to say it anyway.
Tim Minchin, thank you very much indeed.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us.